I'm the Director of International Sustainability at UPS. So it's my job to come to an answer to this question. And in answering it, we're going to step through some science, some politics, some engineering, and some economics. So hopefully enough in there to keep your interest on a breezy Wednesday morning. Okay, so firstly, a little bit about UPS. You may not be familiar. We're a global logistics company. That means we move things around the planet. We don't make anything, we move things. We do quite a lot of it, as you can see from the numbers. And our core business is the one that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide there, our global small package business. And that's all about moving boxes. That's what we spend most of our time doing. We do have a full range of services to support that, but that's our core business. So first of all, a little bit of science, and consistent with the previous speaker, in the process of examining whether or not logistics can be made sustainable, the key single question that we have to understand and grapple with is the one around what happens when we burn fuel. And there's a simple piece of chemistry behind this, which is that if we burn any hydrocarbon-based fuel, combine it with air, we get some water, that's fine, not a problem, but we also get that nasty stuff, CO2, and that's what's been warming the planet. And we saw from our previous speaker that the transportation sector, the sector of logistics, but also people movement, all combined together, is not doing a great job in managing CO2 emissions. We're the outlier, the ones at the top of the graph there that have not improved performance over the past few decades. But we don't only get CO2, we get some other nasties that are at the end of the string there in the shape of carbon, which materializes as particulates. We get nitrous oxides. Those are the things that are polluting our cities all over the world. That's actually Beijing. But in Europe, we don't have anything to be proud of there either. A lot of cities in Europe, of course, exceeding global legal limits in terms of air quality pollution. So that's the science about what happens. That leads us then to ask, well, what's the politics behind this in terms of the reaction from people, the media, and then politicians? And we have some very active individuals in this space. You will all, I'm sure, recognize our good friend Greta Thunberg, who is leading a global initiative in terms of raising awareness about the problems that the planet faces with regards to the greenhouse gas emissions. She's not alone. It's not only at her end of the age spectrum. Some well-respected science experts, such as Sir David Attenborough, are giving very similar messages. And that's got to the point now where the public awareness has turned into street protests. There was an organization called Extinction Rebellion, you might be familiar with, which did a pretty good job of shutting down London for significant periods of time over the past few weeks. None of this, of course, can then be ignored by politicians. We've heard already from the previous speaker what the position of the European Union is in this regard, and we're seeing national governments and media starting to pick up on the story and to respond. The focus initially is on the highest intensity modes of transport. Flight shaming is becoming something that is putting pressure on all industries that own and operate aircraft, including ours. And of course, it's not only about aviation. We have the demonization of diesel, particularly exacerbated by the Dieselgate crisis of a few years ago. So politically, we heard from the EU, national governments are now responding with declarations of climate emergency. The UK, for example, has legally enshrined a requirement for net zero emissions by 2050. And we're seeing a lot of activity from individual cities, particularly in terms of imposing access restrictions based around emissions and congestion standards. And every dot on this map is actually a city that has imposed some material form of access restriction in the recent past that makes a big difference to my business, and I'm sure to many of yours. So these are all changes that represent risks to our businesses, and I think it's only common sense to take the view that we have to be aware of and ahead of these risks in order to avoid being swept away by them. So we now need to turn to some thinking around what do we set out as an ambition. All companies will come to different views around this. We've set out some goals in terms of where we think we need to be, and this is with regards to our ground transportation business. So you can see there from some of the numbers that we're trying to really move this now beyond the experimental stage and into a transition at scale. I won't go into any of those numbers in detail, but we're not talking about small changes here. I completely agree with our previous speaker that this is a fundamental shift that is required, and major changes to our business are underway. From an engineering perspective, in terms of how we achieve those goals, we need to ask ourselves which solutions will be key, and there is one really important transition that I think will be fundamental to all of our lives over the next few decades, and that is that of electrification. Why do I say that? Because, firstly, it's the only technology that will have the potential to completely eliminate the emissions problem. Combined with renewable electricity, the tailpipe emissions disappear, the greenhouse gas emissions can disappear. And you might say, well, what about hydrogen? That's a fair point, but I would argue that actually hydrogen is just another electricity carrier. You use electricity to generate it, you then recombine it in a fuel cell to create electricity. So actually they're partner technologies. Electrification is the core for that reason, but also for another really important reason, which again connects to our previous speaker, which is that electrification is a natural platform for and bedfellow of the connectivity revolution that will be crucial in terms of bringing to us the Internet of Things, the physical internet, autonomous technologies, the kind of world that our sister company Coyote is at the leading edge of. And these will be fundamental to the ability of the transportation sector to be efficient over the coming decades, and efficiency is a platform on which alternative modes of transport can be built. We need to be ruthless in our efficiency before we can hope or expect alternative means of transportation to be able to fill the gap and create zero emissions. So these two work really well together. They're crucial partners. And one of the most important examples of the way in which electrification and connectivity work together, I think, is the way in which we are starting to see now the transportation sector and the energy sector partnering almost in a form of symbiosis. There's almost a merging going on where one sector is able to provide solutions to the problems that the other sector has. For example, as the transportation sector electrifies, we see increasing problems with grid infrastructure pinch points. That can be solved by technologies within the energy sector around smart grids, energy storage, etc. But conversely, the energy sector faces problems with the absorption of intermittency in the production of renewables. The sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. The transportation sector is part of the solution to that problem by the use of fleet-scale batteries in electrified transport, providing buffering to the grid, V2G solutions, etc. So these two sectors will increasingly combine as we see electrification and connectivity partnering in the way that we're discussing. So let's take a round robin of how this is looking at UPS at the moment. Of course, different companies will have different stories. A lot of this for us is about the electrification of our urban distribution fleets. The lack of availability of suitable product on the market has led us to develop a conversion solution. So we've been taking existing diesel collection and delivery vehicles and partnering with 3 companies throughout Europe to enable us to run them on battery power. And that's been something that we've done successfully now for several years. It's not an end game because we can't carry on converting existing vehicles. We have to find a new vehicle solution. So we're partnering with a company called Arrival. It's a small British startup company to develop a brand new ground-up design of electric urban distribution vehicle, hoping to see the first of those before the end of this year. And the good news here, in terms of answering the original question that I posed at the start of the presentation, is that we are seeing costs for these solutions progressively dropping as battery technology improves, cost per kilowatt hour drops. The cost forecast for that new solution there in the top left are quite encouraging. So this is good news. Things are moving in the right direction in this regard. It's not only about trucks, though. This thing is actually an electrically assisted quad cycle. So there are a number of situations, particularly in dense city centre transportation, where we can go beyond the truck altogether. We can take it out of the picture. We can replace it with smaller devices that are e-assist pedal solutions. And then the good news is that we're engaging not only with the emissions debate, but also with the congestion debate that tends to work alongside the energy challenge. And you might be thinking, well, that looks a bit big to be a bike. So I'll just include a picture there that shows you alongside the truck what the scale of it is, kind of a baby bear, mummy bear type picture. So yeah, we'll get the first of those will be on the road in a couple of weeks' time. And a lot of this is being delivered through partnerships. You know, we can't do any of this on our own as an organization. A lot of this, all of this, is about collaboration, in many cases between ourselves as a large organization with small organizations, startups, often with government support. The Quad Cycle at the bottom has been supported by the Irish government. And that, I think, is part of the recipe for progress in this space. But it's not only limited to urban transportation. We're starting to see electrification making inroads into heavy goods transport, courtesy of our colleagues at Tesla. I think it'll be a little while before this will be ready for the mainstream. We will need bridging solutions in this space in the form of renewable natural gas and other very positive solutions. And eventually, I think we'll see electrification take to the air. At the moment, it's limited to small-scale solutions, such as this roof-mounted drone that's taking off from one of our urban distribution vehicles. But we'll see that gradually scale up. So electrification as a technology will be fundamental to our lives over the coming decades. It's not only about the vehicles, of course. We mentioned already the power grid and the way in which the transport and energy sectors are starting to combine. And we have to deal with the challenge of getting power to increasingly electrified transportation fleets, often in single buildings at limited times of the day. So all of our urban distribution vehicles, for example, have to recharge overnight in individual buildings. And that's about a transition in the way in which we manage energy. We're going to have to move from this very simple type of model in the way that we use electricity in our buildings right now, where the electricity only powers what happens in the building. And we're going to have to go through a major change going via this type of structure, which is about the introduction of smart grids and energy storage in order to be able to efficiently recharge fleets without massive local upgrade restrictions and costs. We've just implemented this type of solution in our central London building to overcome what was previously a 65 electric vehicle limit. And the introduction of a smart grid solution with local storage has actually quadrupled that limit without the need to buy any further upgrades. We think this was a world first when we did this, and we're very proud of it. But it's only a start, because the end game is going to look more like this. It's going to involve export of private wire connections, on-site generation, V2G, optimization. It's a new world that we're headed towards, and it reinforces my point, I think, about the transport sector needing to learn to work with and couple with and almost partner with and almost become the same as the energy sector. Our worlds are merging. So lastly then, the economics. We've got a lot of solutions on the table there that have a lot of promise and a lot of potential, and that's great, but of course we can't do any of it unless as businesses we can afford to make sense of it. There are a lot of numbers here that I, for reasons that you'll fully understand, I can't really share, but the good news is that what we're seeing with the urban distribution vehicles and with the cycle solutions and more widely now is that, yes, of course, there is an investment that's required up front, but those investments are having increasingly short return on investment periods. And that's the good news. I think as we see, particularly in the urban distribution sector, as we see the advances in vehicle technology combining with the advances in grid upgrade technology through the use of smart grids, energy storage, etc., we're moving rapidly towards the world where I think in probably just a few years' time, it will be possible to deploy an electric vehicle solution in a city at costs that are comparable with or even potentially better than the cost of a conventional vehicle solution. And then, of course, the game changes because it's no longer about how much can we afford to do to be sustainable. It just becomes the obvious commercial choice. So that has to be our aim and where we're headed for. But that's only, if you like, a piece of the economics picture, because I think there is a much broader one that we've certainly been discovering. I'll give a couple of examples. And the first is the way in which taking a proactive stance with regards to this agenda can be beneficial to the brand of the organization. Yeah, having a leadership image can be really important. It's very difficult to put a number on some of these things, but they're certainly material. This is, for example, some of the publicity that we've seen from the New York Times and other global publications around the work that we've been doing in London with electrification and smart grids and energy storage. So work in this area can reach beyond the environmental press and can certainly support the organization's image in the global media. And that's good news. Another example is the way in which, for sure, this is happening. The city is waking up to climate change. There is increasing investor interest in this mega shift that our organizations are undertaking. So the more that we can do to be ahead of these risks, the more in which we will head off investor concerns about future management or the management of future risks. That's clearly important to our bottom lines as well, albeit, again, difficult to quantify. So all in all, I will summarize with a conclusion, which is that sustainable logistics is for sure not easy, but I really do think it's possible. It's going to be very challenging in the timelines that we have available, that were laid out by our previous speaker, and those are the ones that need to be achieved for the sake of all of us, for our society, and for the next generation. But it's possible. It will, though, I think, crucially, and I hope that this has come out from the presentation today, it will take time, money, and collaboration, and that's a collaborative commitment from all sectors of society, that's industry, that's government, and civil society, to get this right. None of us, I think, can do these things on our own. This is about collaboration between public and private sector, large and small organizations, government support in the right place as well. But we have no choice. We simply have to get this right. So I will stop there and thank you for your time, and I will hopefully close with a video, if it will work. We'll try this, which summarizes some of the things that we've been doing in this space, and then I'll be happy to take any questions in the remaining 10 minutes or so. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent, Peter. Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? There must be. Right, I'll start then. So with your major clients, when UPS engages with major clients, let's be blunt, right? At the end of the day, it's cost and service. But how much is climate sustainability? How much is that starting to factor into some of your larger client discussions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, everything is commercial, clearly. So the truth there is that there is a steadily increasing interest from clients. We're seeing sustainability requirements entering into practically every significant tender that we engage with now. But the way in which that's working is that it's becoming an entry hurdle. It's not something which, frankly, our customers are prepared to pay more for. They aren't. But it is becoming something, and is something already, where if we're not able to meet certain standards, we're just not in the room anymore. Yeah. So the expectation from the market, I think quite rationally, is that this is just something that industry has to get on and do. And unless we do it, then we're not in the race. And I think that's consistent with the commercial imperative of being ahead of the risk and creating opportunity from it.
I don't know whether you were with us yesterday, but we had some interesting insight on innovation and how to organize ourselves for innovation. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how UPS, which at the end of the day is a monster, right? It's brown, it's huge, it's an aircraft carrier. Yeah. How do you set yourself up for innovation within your field, within sustainability, and partner with external companies who I guess sometimes will be several orders of magnitude smaller than you and much more agile and a completely different culture?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I don't think we have all the answers in that space at all. We're still learning how best to do that. I think one of the key things that I've learned, though, is that the goal has to come before the partnership. So I think that an organization has to decide where is it that it wants to go and what kind of technologies and partnerships are going to get it there before the partnership gets created. Very often I've seen it attempted to be done in reverse. a group of organizations get together because it looks like they should be able to do something creative together, but they don't really know what it is that they want to achieve, and then the whole thing dissolves in confusion around conflicting priorities. If you have a clear ambition, and a good example would be the work that we did with the smart grid in London, we kind of knew it made sense that there was going to be a solution of that type that was going to work for us, that would avoid the complexity and the cost and the inflexibility associated with another conventional upgrade of the grid. But we didn't know how to do it. We don't have that expertise. So we set out to specifically form a partnership around creating that solution. So we brought on board the local distribution network operator and their market-facing arm. We brought on board a public entity called Cross River Partnership that brought the London boroughs to us. We then, as a consortium, actively approached government and got funding through Innovate UK. So it was a logical process, but it started with that end goal in mind, that there had to be a solution. And we were then able, through the partners, to create and develop that solution and implement it successfully. So I think that's the main thing that I've learned in the past few years is start with a vision. Start with a real sense of where you want to go. Recognize what you as an organization can't do, because I don't think any of us in this room are going to be able to do these things on our own. It's too big. It's outside of our comfort zones and our bandwidths. So form those partnerships with like-minded organizations who can bring those solutions to the table. And don't be shy of reaching out to government, because the good thing in this space is that the EU, through the Horizon programme, or national governments like in the UK, where I'm familiar with the Innovate UK programme, governments are ready to support this, because for the reasons our previous speaker laid out, government needs this to happen as much as we do. We're all in this together.
Great, and those are the big initiatives, the external stakeholders. Can you maybe also mention how you encourage? You've got several 100,000 staff, right? How do you get the initiatives from the people who are very often under the radar? We heard yesterday from one of our speakers, I think, a very nice bit of advice about celebrating the silent heroes. Yeah, so the people that are on the front line that have plenty of good ideas, they may not be engineers, but they're all helping us to reduce our carbon emissions. How do you manage to get that out of the organization?
No, that's another really good point. I think one of the things that we've seen from this, I mentioned brand benefits and investor relations benefits, but employee engagement benefits certainly spring from this type of work as well. So we have I think different companies can approach this in different ways. We have a global sustainability ambassador program, which is a mechanism by which we invite all of our, as you say, close to 500,000 people in the organization now to get involved in this conversation. So it's a web-based platform through which anybody who's interested in this space can sign up. They get the latest updates on all the things that are going on in terms of innovation, in terms of all of our programs. And in turn, they get to take part in web chats and other mechanisms whereby they can put forward their ideas. And of course, it sometimes gets tricky, because a number of people will have great ideas that we just can't do for one reason or another. You have to be able to be quite blunt sometimes about the reasons, the commercial realities behind some things just not being feasible. And you can't please everybody all of the time. But if you're prepared to have an honest conversation, then our experience here is that particularly the younger generation really engage with this debate. The younger UPSers, the millennials and younger still, are really telling us that this is something they expect from the organization, and anything less is not a company that they want to work for.
Super, great insight. Any questions from the floor? There we go.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for the great presentation. My name is Alexander Nauroth. So you talked about a vision earlier. Which legacy do you want to create for UPS in terms of sustainability?
Which legacy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I think our vision is towards the scaled deployment of these technologies to become a truly sustainable organization, but that's a long way down the road. So I think the most important legacy is one of, I will not be satisfied to leave doing what I'm doing until I think that we have fully cemented into our business these mechanisms in the form of business as usual. Yeah, and we're not there yet. And I think that's the key thing is This is, I kind of liken this transition to where the health and safety debate was maybe, I don't know, 50 years ago, where there was still conversation around, do we need to do this? How are we going to do it? What are the right procedures? Is it really important? We've got to get this to the point where it's obvious, where it just isn't a matter of there being the need for constant internal and external debate around what makes sense. This has to just become common sense, business as usual, part of the everyday. When we get there, I think that'll be a legacy I'll be satisfied with.
Super, great response. Any more questions? Yes. I think this is the last one.
Yeah, it's not so much a question as the fact that, of course, transport is needed by companies to bring products from a point of less value to higher value, in the end to customers. So we, as companies, position our factories at locations where low cost, people that can work in the factories, not and based on a road system, not based on waterways or trains. So yeah, from Asia, our components are coming to Rotterdam. And then, of course, we need transport to somewhere in the middle of Europe where we make our products, if we need that final value addition. There's no rail going there effectively, so we need intermodal connection. But those factories are not located at a rail station. There's no rivers that go right up to our factories, so we need transport. So if you really want to think along the way the EU is bringing us to think, you need a lot more cross-modal over many different ways of transport, not just 2, but 3 or 4, leading to longer lead times, and that, of course, relates to cash flow. And that is results of companies. That means, indeed, cost for the user.
Yeah, in the end. Great commentary. I think it's something that's unavoidable. On the one hand, we've got our future, as Greta Thunberg and fellow activists are saying. There's no point in complaining whether something's going to be more expensive or not if we're not around to even buy it. So the need to address climate change is a sine qua non. It just has to happen. Peter Harris, excellent. Yes, okay.
It's a quick one. Really great presentation, and I think you have a tough job, like most of the likes in companies. But my question is with regards to executive team. How imminent and critical are the sustainability and environmental aspects in the decisions and strategy of the executive team? I just took the opportunity to read David Abney's words in the last annual report, and it was not one single word about environment, not one single word about sustainability, not one single word about CO2. So how far up does it actually reach?
So yeah, that's another great question, and I think it links back to the previous conversation around, is this business as usual yet, or is it not? And bluntly, it isn't yet. I would not characterise our chairman's attitude as being completely separate from the sustainability debate. I think it depends on what you read. So he's very active in supporting our sustainability report and our sustainability initiatives. Maybe not in the document that you were reading. So it's not fully embedded through the organisation yet. We're working on that. It is part of a cultural transition. But I have definitely seen in the time that I've been doing this job, or something connected to it, which is about the last 8 years now, sustainability within UPS has gone from what was, frankly, in the early days, a marketing exercise, to something that is now central to our risk management and opportunity generation initiatives. Is it at the absolute top of the tree when it comes to being compared to other things? Maybe not yet, but it's moving inexorably in that direction. So I think that's just common sense related to the fact that we face some global realities that we can't avoid, and we either choose to be ahead of them or we're going to get swept away by them.
Great, thank you very much. We have to end here. Will you be around, Peter, for more questions on the outside? In that case, everyone, Peter Harris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great insight.